me home. Now, last week on the Tuesday Takeover, we had the fantastic Wolsey writers who shared loads and loads of original stories about transformation myths. Listening to that at home was Gemma Grace, who lives in Ipswich and is an autism awareness campaigner. She is neurodiverse herself. She was diagnosed when she was in her early 20s, which is not something that is as common as or the awareness around it isn't as common as maybe it should be. She started her YouTube channel 7 years ago to kind of share that voice and that experience. Gemma's Journey Grace, if you search for it on YouTube. But over the years on BBC Radio Suffolk particularly, she's been sharing her poetry and listening to the show last week. She decided to write a few poems as well. I had a catch up with her in the park. So, Gemma, we're sat on a beautiful day by the pond in Christchurch Park. We have blue sky, we have ducks and gulls in front of us. And you were listening to our Wolsey Writers Takeover.
Yes, I was.
What did you think of that and what happened?
It was really inspiring. I was sitting at home with my lovely heating on, and it just felt really right to listen to it and how peaceful each person was talking about their hobbies, whether it's writing novels or the poetry. Obviously, I write my own poetry, so I kind of sat there with my nephew and we were talking about it and listening. I was like, you know what, I'm going to get my notepad out and my book and my pens, and I just start writing little odd words on bits of paper and start linking them together. I just felt really motivated to start rewriting again, get my head back into the creative outlet, I guess. And I was like, you know what, today's better than no day not doing it and making up excuses. So I sat there and listened and just felt really pushed to make changes and inspire myself to get back into the writing. And just by hearing the Wolsey creative writers do what they were doing, I was just like, you know what, they've given me the reason to start writing again. Hearing their stories and their messages is just really powerful. This poem is called Transformation and Me. They were talking about the theme of transformation last night, so I thought I'd jump on the theme and include my own version. So it says, Transformation and Me. Me knowing I've been through a transformation and finding out I'm on the spectrum, a spectrum of neurodiversity. Neurodiversity knowing it's okay to be me. Me, an autistic woman trying to find my place where I belong every day, hoping soon the battle will be over. Over every day people will understand that I've tried to conform to what's expected of me. Me being transformed, breaking the wall around me. Me finally learning and accepting I'm transformed, living my unique life. Life wondering why it's always been a struggle. Transformed life is amazing, seeing each day in a different lens. Lens knowing each colour, each piece. Piece by piece every day has become easier. Transformation happens over time, over years. Years I know I've found my voice. Voice I've transformed to educate and advocate. Listening to many voices of others. Others to help me to be transformed to who I am today. Transformation is about how and me the world collide. Collide I've overcome my fear of doubting myself. Myself now is the time to see the transformation of all the years gone by.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really good. Thank you. Have you got another one there?
Yeah. And this one is called Not Enough. It says, I'm sorry if I've hurt you. I've tried to change. Change, but you didn't listen to me. It's not enough. Enough, it's time to be me. All the memories that I can remember. Remember, it's not enough for you to understand me. I can start to drown in this society who needs to turn it around. What I want is not enough to get my personality. I wish you'd understand. Understanding it's not enough. I have to keep a smile on my face. I'm sorry if this hurts you. Hurts you that you didn't hear me for being who I'm meant to be. The memories that I have buried away because it's easier than it seems. I wish you'd understand that slowly I'm drowning from the stereotype and assumptions. It's not enough for me wanting it to stop. It's stopping everything you know to make it better. I'm not enough as I'm different from you. I'm sorry if this hurts you. I'm sorry I'm not enough to be accepted, but for one day I can finally be free.
Wow, drowning in stereotypes and assumptions. That's a strong line.
Yes, for me, I guess it's just a way that I felt with people judging me and how I feel other people with disabilities who I've spoken to feel it's the stereotype because it's the label. Once you get diagnosed with something like autism, it's the kind of, oh, and people panic. So it's kind of what I felt since I've been diagnosed. Not so much now, but back in the past, and occasionally there'll be a comment said to me, or someone will say it without realising it's the offensive term, and it's kind of just how I felt over the years, that people still will stereotype me because I'm a female, and the stereotype is autism doesn't affect females, which is obviously not correct terminology. So it's kind of what I go through on a daily basis, I guess.
It's interesting when you talk about the terminology and language and what is acceptable changes quite dramatically over time. I've seen a lot of people now just describe themselves as being neurodiverse.
Yes.
Which is I don't know, what do you think of that term?
I like the term neurodiverse. I think it makes it more inclusive and accepting of people, because when you're on such a large spectrum of different needs, abilities, talents, people are all different. So for me, I'm very high functioning, but again, another person who you may come across may be less, I guess, functioning, less able to do things. But I don't like using the word less than, because then it belittles other people who are
as soon as you start talking about a spectrum and the assumptions that the word autism has, so neurodiverse is much broader and more neutral.
Yes, absolutely. Being neurodiverse just means that everyone's on the spectrum and got different needs and abilities. I think it's more a way to say that we are different, as well as being the same, because we're all on the same triad of spectrum. We all have the same sort of needs and abilities, but again, not everyone will have the same traits. For me, for example, it's noise, it's taste, smells, whereas other people may not have that. They may only have one of the traits or two of the traits, so it depends where you are on that spectrum of things.
So you are celebrating 7 years of running your YouTube channel.
Yes.
Take me back to when you first posted your first thing. What did you want that to do, and how did it feel doing that? Because it is a risk putting yourself out there.
So for me, it was kind of a research thing at first. It was a way of finding out more about what autism was, and it was through the autism social worker, through the autism diagnostic service, who said to me, why don't you go onto YouTube and research autism? And I kind of looked at her and thought, I said to her, you've got to be joking, this is not what I kind of thought of doing. I said, no one's going to want to hear from someone with autism, especially who's a female. And she said, no, just research it first, you're going to find out information. So I went onto YouTube, and what I found was the videos from children or videos from older adults, but there was no one from my age, in our late 20s, early 30s, who was newly diagnosed. So I was like, oh, there is nobody. Where is the help? Where is the support? So I remember going back to her on the phone call and saying, hey, did you kind of trick me? There's nothing here for me to look at. And she goes, well, that's the point, Gemma. And I was like, what do you mean? And she says, why don't you create your own channel? I was very nervous. I didn't know what I was potentially getting myself into at the time. And she's like, just do one video and you can always put it on private. So I was like, okay. So I created an account, kind of hummed and hawed about doing it. And I was like, okay, I'll put one video out, just a little introduction about myself. And then when I unprivate it a few months later, it got quite a lot of good hits. I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could be good at it. I'll try. So now I created another couple of videos, put them on private, and then I unprivate them again a few months later, and I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. Maybe it's a good way of therapy for me, a way of self-expression. So I rang up my social worker back and said, hey, maybe this is a good idea for me to do this as a form of self-outlet. And she said, I told you this would be good for you, Gemma, but at the same time, obviously, YouTube is very, like I said, at risk, because you put yourself out there as a public figure, someone who gets watched and viewed and criticised, judged potentially, and I didn't really realise the effect that online cyber comments could have on me. I didn't really think it'd be that bad, and over the years, obviously, I've had my fair share of trolling comments, people being quite abusive, rude.
How do you cope with that? What do you do?
At first, I didn't know what to do. I got quite overwhelmed. I kind of just shut myself away and didn't really respond to anybody. But then over the years, what I do now is I have a lot of good moderator friends who I made on YouTube who watch for my channel and help me out. Also, I moderate it myself, so if I'm online active, I see some comments that don't look good, I'll go through them and just block them and delete them, so that I can't see them and the person can't come back unless they're on a multiple account, because people do that. But for me, I usually just access to good comments, and then YouTube will block the bad comments because there's a hidden word that I've got a list of blocked words that aren't allowed on my channel. So things like the word like brain damage, stuff like that. Like, because I've had a lot of comments, people call me brain damaged, and other words which I'm not going to repeat because they're not very nice and I don't wish people to see them. But yeah, I kind of have a block word section that I hide them kind of comments in, and then YouTube will flag it and say, hey, you've received this comment, what do you want to do? So usually it just goes into my junk or my block words list and stays there.
Okay, so there is support there from the channel, as well as I guess you learn to ignore it or look past it and focus on the positive comments that you get.
Yes.
It's really interesting when you are doing anything, whether it's on the radio or any of the social media channels. You don't really know who is going to view it and what impact it will have on them. And like you said, when you were looking and there wasn't a voice that you could directly relate to,
yes.
If you do find that, if someone finds you and it's like, well, I'm a woman in my 20s and I've been newly diagnosed, I'm not alone. I mean, that's a really important moment for them.
Absolutely. When you're newly diagnosed, you don't know where to go at first. It's very overwhelming, and if you find someone like myself who's on there actively being the voice for people who are searching for answers or questions, then you don't, like you said, you don't feel so alone. Whereas at first for me, I felt very alone. I was like, oh, I'm newly diagnosed, I've got so many questions in my head, I don't know what to do, I'm very confused, I'm very upset, and I kind of had to just try and deal with it myself. But luckily now there is a lot more of us on YouTube actively doing autism awareness disability content, so there's a larger group of us. But for me, it's become my self-therapy. It's become a way of letting my voice be heard without feeling restricted, I guess, because a lot of the time, especially being around family, they don't really tend to understand the meltdown side of things, or why I'm so anxious all the time. People will say to me, oh, just snap out of it, Gemma, you're absolutely fine. I'm like, no, you really don't get it, because at least online there's a lot more people who are like, oh yeah, Gemma, we get the meltdowns, we get the anger you have, the frustration, we get why you get upset, and we can be there to support each other. So it's kind of a self-therapy for both parts, not just me, but for the other person as well. And hopefully a lot more parents will see, hey, these videos are expressing my thoughts in a way that is safe. It's a way to get my thoughts out of my head, to make myself less anxious and to help other people, because I don't want other people being stuck or left out or feeling stressed out because they haven't had nowhere to go. So if I can be one voice for one person, then it's made my job more easy to do, because I love what I do and I love helping people. I love being out and about, talking to radio such as yourself, and being able to go out and do the things that I can do to help people. So for me, it's all about self-therapy and I guess self-confidence and self-esteem, because I've always had low self-esteem myself, whereas now I'm like, I am a good person, I can do what I want. I just have to make sure that I use the right language and make sure that I'm not coming across as a medical professional or using the medical language, because again, I'm not a medical person, so I make sure that it's all my own personal perspective.
And so that's really interesting that you talk about the network of people sharing disability awareness content and that kind of lived experience, whatever their circumstances or situation.
Yeah.
And even compared to 7 years ago when you started, but the power maybe that social media has given people with disabilities to get their voice heard, both to each other in a kind of supportive way, but also to the wider community to say what they have to say, be part of the conversation.
Exactly. The more we include people with disabilities on social media, the better it'll be to be inclusive, because a lot of people, like myself at first, were very scared, and now you've got more people wanting to do YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. Again, I do a lot of advocacy on my Facebook as well. It's a form of reaching out to other people who may be too scared to do YouTube, because it is quite a scary thing to put yourself out there, and the networking is incredible. Once you make some really good friends on there, I speak to people from Canada, I speak to people from Europe, from the States, and it's incredible. You never think that YouTube would reach out that far to people, and even local people. I've spoken to a couple of local people recently, and it's just sharing your life experience with someone and connecting back to how they feel, what they're going through, and sharing the experiences is just so powerful, because you never know who you could touch, who you could help. Even a person who may be wanting to be assessed for autism or in a mental health condition, you don't know how much you could help them, to say, hey, I'm here to support you, like this is what you should do to help yourself, and you could help that person make their life so much better. So social media has been amazing for me, and I wouldn't look back. I think the one thing I'd change is try to help myself a bit more, and also be more active now, especially during this kind of circumstances that we're in. I'm trying to be a bit more active online with campaigning, doing video content. I think that's my passion, is get back onto my content and try and help somebody.
That's Gemma Grace.